Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the Todd situation. Todd's trying to remember what the pig dude told him last episode, and apparently it was in the form of a song, and Todd's sitting there trying to change. He's like, no, but maybe, kind of trying to, explain everything to Julia, and Julia's like, basically give me the gist of it. The way he makes it sound, it almost sounds like basically Fillory's kind of fucked, because it no longer has a god. Well, god and or gods. They're long since dead, but I wonder if that's something that's secretly been building up the entire time, not having a god ruling over it. Maybe that's caused some complications. I'm curious to kind of dive into that and figure out like what that's all about. And I wonder, is that kind of setting it up so that Fillory legitimately needs a new god, so someone's going to have to step up to become the next god? Or they're going to have to find a god to convince to go over there and look after Fillory type of thing? I wonder, does that kind of throw Fillory off balance? Has Fillory kind of been off of balance this entire time? Or maybe having a god protects Fillory from whatever it is coming, whatever apocalypse level destruction or darkness that's going to come and basically kill everyone. That's what I'm assuming. We'll ultimately have to wait and see on that front. But I love that, Todd's like, will you help me? And Julia's like, no. She's like, I'm just going to, take over the whole thing for you. And Todd's like, oh my God, thank you. I'm super well unprepared, for this whole situation. And I like that. And Todd's like, oh, I have some notes back at the school. I should probably go get them. She's like, yeah, go ahead. And he's just she's like, just go. And he's just tripping on it. It's like, yes. It's like, poor Todd. I was like I had brought up before, I was like, oh my God. I brought this up last episode. I was like, oh my God, is this going to be Todd's chance to step up to be a hero? Because even like I said, everything got stepped up with Josh. So I was wondering if the same thing was going to happen in this regard. It turns out not to be the case, but either way, Julia kind of hijacking what was supposed to be his quest, because for her it's like, I'm kind of the hero. It's the thing of it's not even Julia being self-centered. It's just kind of come on, Todd, really? Todd? Don't worry, I literally said the same thing last episode too, of come on, Julia is way more qualified. She's been through way more apocalypses than Todd has. To be fair, she's literally going through multiple timelines, plus all the shit they've been through in this one timeline 40, so that's a whole thing. But a lot of stuff went down. Obviously, Elliot and Margot go back to Fillory to kind of deal with all of that. I love them being like, yeah, you kind of pulled us away, saying this Earth needed us and stuff like that. And Fillory's the one that's actually in trouble. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, guys, that we ended up saving 1 billion people that would have died. I'm sorry, guys, I got it wrong. But that's a whole thing in itself of we'll get to that. But it's actually kind of sad in the grand scheme of things. Well, for one, Penny's dealing with the fact of the matter is things are going wrong at the school because the circumstances have changed, because they moved the moon. Like Zelda said, there will be consequences for that. And because of that, magic is off kilter. So people are once again blowing themselves up or killing themselves because Lipson tried to adjust the security system. It backfired, hurt her. And basically, Penny is now dean because nobody wants the job, and because Penny showed up late, they all voted for him. And he's like, "You assholes! I'm literally new at this, and you pieces of crap. I'm kind of basically a student myself." I mean, to be fair, once again, it's something I've talked about. None of our main characters have been at this school that long. I mean, it's I'm surprised they know anything because they've literally been on one adventure after another. Season 1's probably the longest time they've ever, at least within the confines of the show, spent time actually learning in the confines of the school. The rest of it stuff is just stuff that I guess they kind of picked up along the way, especially in Julia's case. She's never actually in this timeline officially studied at Breakville, so that's a whole thing. Well, except for when she was her fake self, that personality she was in season 4, that whole thing, that's kind of an exception, but regardless. But Penny's kind of got this job, and it ends up in this very complicated thing because now all the students are coming to him about their problems and stuff like that. And he's like, and I even love that later on, he's like, Jesus, we took Falk for granted. He actually did way more at this school than we gave him credit for, besides just drinking and playing. It's no, he actually kind of kept this ship running. But it's interesting because now it turns into a whole complicated thing of because because they end up pressing a button, and that kind of sets stuff in motion. It's okay, so it's supposed to be only an emergency. So it's I love Penny being worried about it, and Julia just kind of slaps a button, and it's oh, it did nothing. Oh, well, I got stuff to deal with. Falk shows up, and it's oh, how'd you get out of the... I was how'd you get out? It's huh. And he's and he's drinking again. I'm oh, that's interesting. And I was like, okay, what's going on? I did seem like it was where he even had the scar and everything. It's what the hell is that all about? But nevertheless, the next thing was really interesting was the whole Julia and Penny thing, and I'm not too surprised. They've basically been setting this up since the season premiere that it's not going to be a perfect relationship. It's a rocky relationship because, Julia wants to go full-blown saving the world. Penny's like, no. Like, the fact of the matter is we literally already saved this world. Like, every world in crisis, now that being fillery, doesn't make it our problems. The fact of the matter is, he's like, I already told you what I want. I want a regular life, but for you, it's just you're always going off to the next adventure. And so for Penny, he's also wondering, like, well, when is it going to end? Are you going to basically retire from world saving at 35, then we can start our life together? Or could it be a situation this is never going to end? She's like, because basically he understands why she's doing it. And she's like, okay, I get it. Like, dealing with the fact is that my best friend died, and the fact of the matter, because it's like, what this means to me. Like, because, for her, she wants to use magic now that she has it back without having it for so long, because a quitting sacrifice, that pain gave her back magic, and she wants to take that gift that essentially Quentin gave her, and he wants to make sure that she wants to make sure that it was, once again, like, wants to do something good with that magic, and that means saving the day, like honoring Quentin. So it turns into a whole thing of, that, and so obviously it's like a difference of opinion, like they're never going to meet on this, so Julia's kind of saying, like, maybe we should be done, which is kind of sucky, but then they get stuck together, and it's like, okay, but then Fogg comes in, and he's followed by Todd, then Fogg is calling Todd Elliot. I'm like, what the hell is up with that? And then Todd's like, Pigman. I was like, maybe them being out and about is making them forget stuff. It's like, what's that all about? Lo and behold, they follow after Todd, and it turns out Todd's acting weird, and it's like, they're like, why are you acting so skittish or whatever? He's like, this is my natural state. I mean, it's like, to be fair, it kind of is Todd in general, like anxious and off kilter like that. But then it's like, oh, he's walking the hall, and they're like, whoa, watch out, there's like landmines everywhere. I was like, that's a hell of a defense mechanism, like landmines everywhere. And Todd's like, oh, thanks, steps back, explodes. I was like, oh my god, blood splatters, guts, and I'm like, holy shit. Then another Todd walks up, I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then it's like, yeah. And then you're like, wait a minute, what could this all be about? It's like, oh, freaking Tom Moms. I was like, oh my god. I was like, that's so interesting. It's literally a Todd from a different timeline and a Fogg from a different timeline, which is so interesting, because I love that we're messing with that, because it's an element, it's a storyline element that literally only comes up like once every season, like dealing with another timeline. Like, obviously, like, it popped up literally one time last season when, like, Homestead was trying to send Morena and Penny back to the original timeline to save his mom's life. Like, that was the one time. So it just pops up so infrequently. So it's just interesting to see that it kind of pops up like this. It's actually sad. The circumstances. I even love, like, Julia being like, oh, which Fogg is this? Because he works with Fogg and is, basically taking records for Fogg. I mean, to be fair, Fogg's identity was getting wiped away, so Fogg kind of ran through a lot of stuff. So I'm assuming this is all byproducts of all that last season when, like, Todd was his record keeper, so Fogg probably informed him, but, like, basically Todd was like, oh yeah, like, these are all he knows all 39 other Foggs from the different timelines, and it's like, oh, this particular one is from timeline 17, and he's a psychopath. Apparently he blew up brake bills, so that's interesting. So it's really interesting to kind of break that whole situation down. At the same time, Alice ends up meeting this dude, what's his name, Hamish, and I think that's going to be an interesting relationship, because it's like, Hamish kind of seems like he's a bit of a know-it-all, and I think Alice hates him because he is a bit of a know-it-all, because she's a bit of a know-it-all. So I don't think Alice deals well with people kind of correcting her, and I just personally get that feeling, but maybe that's not the case. But yeah. Also turns out he knows her through her mom. He's like, oh yeah, Stephanie. It's like, oh yeah, like the thing she was working on, and obviously, like, Alice is like, ew, gross. And he's like, no, it's not the innuendo that it sounds like. He's like, no, I would never hook up with another botanist. I'm like, okay, sure. So that's interesting. But basically, it was actually pretty impressive when he actually dismantled a spell, because he was like, oh, you just basically kind of, like, go for, like, you don't actually need to use a spell to kind of counter it. You could just, like, find, like, this particular weak point of it and pull it apart. But, yeah. What ends up being an interesting... while that's going down, like, we have they end up discovering, like, there's a particular plant in there. Basically, there's a machine that kind of adjusts, because apparently this plant in particular grows on a different world, but the conditions and circumstances are somehow making it grow here. And it's like the previous botanist professor. I wonder, was it a professor we had met? Because they make it sound like the professor died. So I wonder, is it someone that was killed off? I feel like you would have a replacement soon, so it would be like the botanist had to be someone that blew themselves up this season or something. Because I was about to say, like, because I was about to say it couldn't be someone that the Beast killed, because I was like, it's been years, so you would have already replaced them by now. But regardless, it seems like that's a key figure and everything. Because of it, Alice was able to start doing magic. And the moment, like, I already kind of figured as much. The moment, like, it wasn't working, she was like, magic wasn't working. Alice was like, circumstances are changing. I was like, because my immediate thought was like, the moon is still moving. You guys got the moon to move, and I was like, oh, but it's still moving. But then, like, I will get to it later on. But at first, I was like, yeah, could you guys move the moon? It's like, no, the moon moved itself. But I was like, because at first I was thinking, well, you used magic to move the moon, and the moon kept moving. But then I remembered, it's like, right, the moon moved itself. But then it's like, well, maybe she's still moving on her own. Like I said, we'll get to that soon enough. But it seems like Fogg's plan was to basically, he wanted to teleport all of Breakbills to Earth 7. I mean, or I'm going on multiverse here. I meant to say Timeline 17, which is actually kind of a bummer and, you know, sad in the end of the day. Like, his reasoning for doing it, because he was doing that to kind of stop all the damage from the Beast, but it ended up backfiring and, you know, caused problems. But, you know, Jane just kind of went straight to Timeline 18, you know, started the loop and went to Timeline 18. But Fogg, he was stuck there to live out that timeline, which she was like, wait, you were stuck, like, you lived in that timeline? Your timeline kept going? And he's like, yes. He's like, don't you know anything about the multiverse? Which even I was like, yeah. I mean, you literally visited Timeline 23. That's where you met the other Morena and Penny. But I guess maybe she was thinking maybe those I don't know, because that timeline still kept going regardless of everything too. So that's why I'm kind of wondering why I thought that was interesting that Julia kind of said that. But I don't know, maybe I'm remembering that wrong. Maybe there were different circumstances that led them to getting to that timeline. So maybe she was like, it was kind of I got plopped in a timeline that no longer, because that was the whole, I'm remembering now, because that was the whole point when, like, Quentin talked to Alice from that timeline in season 2. The fact of the matter is, it's like that's a timeline that no longer exists. So I guess the whole thing is, like, it's kind of a confusing thing where it seems like those timelines disappear. There's some fragment of them there, but, like, getting to them is kind of like a weird set of circumstances have to regardless. I just thought that was kind of a fascinating conversation, because it's like there's aspects of it that kind of seem like they contradict themselves, like, from regardless. Maybe I'm just getting too caught up in the details, or maybe I'm missing details and not realizing it. But regardless, I thought that was all fascinating. And like I said, it's actually sad, because for him it's like, well, obviously he finds out, like, oh, I have a daughter I didn't know about, that being Morena. And so he wants to kind of correct that. He wants, you know, but he needs Breakbills back to kind of correct for the mistake that he made. So, and I guess that's why he had a Todd, because I guess Todd just happened to be out of the school at the time of the explosion. So I guess he never got to know his students enough in that timeline. So he's just like, oh, Elliot, but it's like, right, whatever, because he doesn't, you know, I guess he just never bothered learning Todd's name, or, you know, regardless, I thought that was interesting. But then he starts talking about the fact is, well, what about you, Penny? The fact of the matter, because it's like, because, you know, Penny's judging him and everything, but he's like, really? You have room to judge me? Mr. I abandoned timelines just to kind of get a fresh start, you know? I mean, to be fair, this timeline was without a Penny, so he felt like he could, you know, take the opportunity, but it is still kind of shitty. To be fair, his timeline is super effed up, and it's just nothing but death. But, I mean, truth be told, none of the previous 39 timelines were great, so, you know, that's to be kind of expected. But luckily they were able to stop Fogg. But kind of like, you know, circling all that through, I think that's so interesting, because Alice is kind of figuring out the circumstances keep changing. And it's like, oh yeah, because the moon's pissed at them. Because the whole point was, like, basically they stopped the moon from breaking apart. So we basically stopped the, you know, the second apocalypse beyond the harmonic convergence. But I'm thinking, remember, the moon is made, like, there's so much, like, what was it, dust there or whatever, that makes it so that magic can't affect. And I guess even though the loop was making it so that the moon kept piecing herself back together. She remembers every loop. So it's like I've literally broken apart so many damn times, and it's literally your fault. So the moon's kind of basically giving them the middle finger, and I guess she's just kind of constantly moving just to say, fuck you guys for, I hate you guys. So now they got to find a way to get back on the moon's good terms so that she can move back to where she was. But obviously moving back to exactly where she was, well, I guess because now the harmonic convergence is over, all she would need to do is move back to where she was. So it was that particular moment of everything aligning up, but now that that moment's passed, they can put her back. But whether she'll go down that route or not, we'll have to see. They'll probably have to talk to more lunatics to kind of figure that out. So on top of that, obviously Julia is going to Fillory. And I thought it was, actually very sweet when Benny talked about why. It's because when Julia went off on her venture to Fillory, she never came back. And so for him, he's kind of worried. Which, I mean, to be fair, she's been to Fillory a couple of times. But I guess it's more so in this sense of like an apocalypse level. Well, because in that situation, it was about related to the beast. It kind of traumatizes him a little bit to kind of think about that. I'm trying to think in the grand scheme of things. Has she really been back to Fillory since season 3? I don't think she has she? She hasn't really stepped foot in Fillory since, like when she was without her, was that season 3? No, that was season 2, right? Yeah, in season 2 when she didn't have her, shade anymore. I think that was it, if I remember correctly. Maybe that was season 2. Maybe that was still season, yeah, it was season 2, regardless. I think that's the last time she was in Fillory, if I can remember correctly. Regardless, like that was even before Penny 23 met her. Like I said, I'm getting caught up in semantics and stuff like that. But for him, he just can't keep doing this, but he's still wishing her the best of luck. But it seems like he is taking over this whole being Dean situation pretty well. It's going to be interesting to see how that kind of goes. Fogg did bring up the fact is he knew of someone from his timeline because he's fucking her. That's such a weird detail to kind of bring up like that. But someone that could fix Penny so that he could travel again. So we'll see. His student that kind of popped away, who we found out was a Chatwin, whatever happened to that, that's definitely going to be interesting, which I'm wondering if that has something to do with Fillory's apocalypse or what, or is that just kind of like, oh, that's set up for something further in the future? We'll have to wait and see, but it's like, maybe that's going to be the reason why Penny kind of rushes to get his powers, like get his, as he calls it, his GPS back. We'll see, but obviously Fogg 17 is still kicking around, here, so it's going to be interesting to see. It's like, yeah, we don't have our Fogg, but we can use this Fogg, so... So there's that whole situation. Then on the other side of things, in Fillory, obviously there's the whole thing about, Margot and Elliot trying to like deal with this whole thing of like, okay, so what do we do? Home dude who talks to the animals. I love him talking mad shit. It's like, oh yeah, don't trust an animal with a pouch or something like that, because it's like, oh, she's a traitor and stuff like that. And it makes him remember his love, the animal he loves, who's a sloth. I guess she didn't make the trip. I guess they kind of had to leave her behind. Maybe she made the decision to stay behind, regardless of all that. Or maybe, whatever the circumstances may be, they have plans to kick all the animals out of, like, the castle, kind of, like, send them outside of the castle, White Spire's territory. But nevertheless, it's the whole situation of like, all right, we got to figure out like whether, the Dark King is actually evil, or is it just Bick that's being the evil one because he's the one that kind of whispers in the king's ear and gives him advice. And obviously you have Elliot kind of, countering that, which I love. Obviously, Charlton popping up again and is like, where have you been? He's like, well, I have to sleep. Plus, everything that you're doing isn't always interesting, so... once again, I love that that's such a thing that like Elliot hasn't let anyone else know that that's a thing, but it's happening. So there's a whole situation of obviously how they want to handle the fairies. Bick is like, let's go in there, slice them up, get to go. They're thieving people. They're terrible. It's like, obviously Elliot's like, I've got experience with the fairies. Yeah, they can be a little duplicitous, but the fact of the matter is this isn't the way they've kind of handled business beforehand. So he wants to handle things very differently, which I even love Charlton being like, oh yeah, he's very charming, he's this and he's that, I can see it. But it's like, obviously Charlton's got a very bad feeling about the Dark King, which at the same time, Margot goes to track down Finn, who's kicking it with the fairies, but Margot's like, yo, it's me, like, aren't we tight? Turns out, and it's actually kind of messed up, because I like the way Margot describes it. Basically, it's a super messed up game of telephone. There are very few fairies alive who remember Fargo. I mean, I said Fargo, Margot, it's been, 300 years. So, but over the years, the tale has gotten twisted more and more, where it's like, oh, Margot actually made a deal and was super tight and cool with the fairies, into more so like she's a terrible, terrible person. So it's like, okay. And she tries to make good with that one particular fairy. Why did that fairy in particular that they were mainly talking to in this episode, she looked so familiar. I don't know what I know her from. I have to look into it. Like, it was just bugging me the entire time. I was like, I know you. Part of me kept thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, that's not the actress who plays, because I don't remember her name, because I was looking her up recently. The actress who plays Gamma on The Walking Dead. Like, she looks like, and I forgot where I recognized that actress from, because I looked her up randomly, and I was like, oh my god, this is the actress who played Gamma on The Walking Dead, but I can't remember who it was. Oh, I'm terrible with names and faces. But I feel like it isn't her. I feel like there is it's some other actress that I feel like I'm familiar with. I hate it. I hate it so much when I feel like I recognize someone, but I can't place it. So... But Margot kind of got flipped out, because Margot can only take people's shit for so long, and she's just kind of like, you're freaking stupid if you're not going to trust me. And I love she made a reference to something her dad said, which obviously, last season kind of tiptoed on some stuff about her issues with her dad. Which, to be fair, it's not just her who, obviously, like, even, and maybe that's something her, I wonder, is that something her and Elliot have ever talked about? The fact is they both got, family issues. But nevertheless, it was, interesting. Obviously, Bick shows up with Elliot. And luckily, also love that Charlton made a reference to Vic from the Shield, Michael Chiklis's character. I'm like, that's such a weird. I mean, I guess you have been in Elliot's head watching TV shows, which I'm assuming I was like, oh, so I guess Elliot is a fan of the Shield or something like that. That's interesting. The fact is because the only reason why he's able to, Charlton knows that, is because he was watching it through, Elliot's remembrances and stuff like that. It's just fascinating when you actually think about that. Nevertheless, luckily all the fairies were hidden, and they were able to, because I also love Margot was like, yeah, some of the people avoid eye contact with some of the other Centaurians, because they're like, oh, they don't know, like, if it's her time of the month. So it's like, it's because, one, they don't know much about women, or two, it could be because they think she could always wolf out. Either way, they don't know enough so they're all kind of scared a little shitless over her, so they kind of avoid her. But then, because obviously Bick is bringing up this whole thing about, gold and stuff like that. They stole it. It's like, no, obviously he planted, hence the whole Vic from the Shield situation. But later on, we end up finding out, okay, so what this is actually all about is because Bick has actually been, they actually have beetles that shit gold. And he's kind of been hoarding it. And it's like, because isn't he a descendant of ticks? That's the whole thing, which... Where the hell is Tick at during all of this? I just thought that was fascinating, because it's like, oh, so that must mean that you have to circle back to him to be like, I mean, maybe it was something his descendants did, but it seems like, probably something Pick is a part of as well. I mean, because the whole joke is his family in particular are kind of a little conniving. It's kind of what it is, but regardless, I just thought that was all interesting. And obviously, we find out the reason why he hates the fairies, just because it's he's kind of like a Felurian purist, kind of being like, oh, they're not Felurians, so, which obviously the Dark King is like, oh, that would have meant I had innocent blood on my hand and stuff like that, which obviously Charlton's enjoying this. He's like, oh yeah, it worked out beautifully. And then Elliot was kind of pushing him aside and being like, oh, you shouldn't beat yourself up. And it's like, oh, he has a real thing for, and I guess it's because, he losing Quentin is kind of nice to meet someone else. And he even explains it to Charlton, because Charlton's like, I don't think he's all good, but it's like, well, because I'm hoping that he's not all bad, but also there's another part of Elliot that's kind of hoping he is all messed up because Elliot's messed up. But Charlton was like, no, you basically kind of saying no, don't do that. Basically, if you think you're messed up and that's all you deserve, then that's all you're going to get. And Elliot's being like, why do you care so much? And he's like, well, what happens to you happens to me, and I definitely deserve better than him. And part of me was like, Are they hinting to the fact that Charlton actually likes Elliot? Is that what that's happening, or is there something deeper to that? Or is it not just like a does he like him, or is it just like actually Charlton looks at Elliot as a friend and is like, no, I care about you. I mean, to be fair, he probably knows he definitely knows Elliot better than anyone else because he's been around Elliot's subconscious like the entire time, probably like, you know, living every memory. So he knows Elliot on a level that no one else. I'm sure there's things that he knows about Elliot that even Margot doesn't know. Which I'm also interested too, that the fact of the matter is I guess the fairies haven't recognized Margot has a fairy eye. I mean, I don't know if that has any importance to them, but nevertheless. So it all kind of works out at the end of the day, but the fairies decide to show them the secret, and it turns out the Dark King is melting the gold, and he uses it to raise up the takers. Not too surprised. I don't know whether that's a situation of he's creating them, which I'm assuming they are kind of like golems, but part of me was also wondering, is like, because they're coming from the ground, there was a part of me was like, is he actually resurrecting them? Did he actually kill the original takers? And is he resurrecting? But it's like, no, I think he's straight up making them, which I previously brought up, because I was like, the way he ends up killing them the exact same way they end up flying, like, he's currently the only one that has the magic. It feels like he totally had to be in control, because he wants to perpetuate, like, oh, I'm a hero and everything. Now, Elliot kind of sees him as kind of being the dick that he is, so there's that whole situation. I'm curious to see what that kind of means going forward, but now they see like, oh yeah, he's the one kind of causing problems and stuff like that. He's perpetuating this story of like how much of a hero he is, meaning that he's the one that brought the takers forward so that he could show up and become the hero. I guess, you know, I was just remembering the fact that I had previously wondered if he was a McAllister, but I don't know. Because that's still floating in my mind of like, well, what family does he belong to? Because he says that he's from Earth and everything, so that's... I had to remind myself of like who I'd previously said he was, and I said I think he's a McAllister. We'll see if that ends up being the case or not. Maybe it's not, and maybe he's just kind of from an unrelated family. But I'm just like, we'll kind of have to, you know, wait and see. But yeah, I'm curious, like, is that what he uses all the gold for? Because they were like, oh, which is kind of shitty, because it's like, oh, you're saying like Bick is making it seem like the fairies are evil and stuff like that. You were going to kill innocent people, but now it's like, well, I get, because he was suggesting that the gold was being stolen, so, which shows like, so does that mean he actually pays anyone anyway? Or is he just going to like, which is also dickish anyway, but I guess for him it's like, even if people die here and there, like, it's so interesting, like the whole thing of like a high horse of like, oh yeah, like innocent blood and stuff like that. You spill plenty of innocent blood yourself by all the people that have been killed by the takers that you've basically made. Once again, that depends on if he doesn't actually make the takers. I'm assuming he did, but like I said, not unless the other side of it is he just resurrects them after he kills them, but I'm pretty sure it's more so like he actually makes them. You know, we'll kind of have to see where this all goes, kind of how this all plays a role in this whole apocalypse thing. Obviously, Julia showing up. And obviously, you know, her plan is to come to Fillory to kind of help out with the, you know, things, which obviously Margot and crew got their plans on how to deal with this. So it's going to be interesting to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.